Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the next panel, Beyond the Expected, Broadening the Conservative Base, along with your moderator from the One America News Network, Amanda House.
How are we doing this?
Hello. You're welcome.
You sure?
Yep.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. Let's give Jamila another round of applause for her great speech. Today, we're going to be talking about exactly what Jamila mentioned and the concerns across America about where the Republican Party is headed and how to strategically make it bigger. Joining me will be Tammy Bruce, Fox News contributor and former liberal community organizer, Grover Norquist, founder and president of Americans for Tax Reform, and Heather Higgins, president of Independent Women's Voice, I get those two confused, and then chairman of Independent Women's Forum. So first up, Heather, let's hear what you have to say about this.
Okay. There should be slides for C-SPAN or anyone at home. I hope that they can watch them rather than watching me. There was a Super Bowl this year. Who saw it? This is one way to tell you what happened. But this is Ed Sable, whose NFL films changed football from being just a simple tale of wins and losses to an epic tale of human struggles, successes, and disappointments. So this, a disappointed quarterback, is another way to tell the story. To quote Sable, "Tell me a fact and I'll learn. Tell me a truth and I'll believe. But tell me a story and it will live in my heart forever." Similarly, at a meeting of environmental grant makers a few years ago, there was much anxiety about the fact that the science wasn't holding up and the data was being challenged. That is, until one member got up and said, "Remember, our stories will always trump their facts and data." On the right, our strategists too often focus on talking to our base with messages that may or may not be effective with other voters. In fact, sometimes are counterproductive. Democratic strategists, on the other hand, start differently. They divide the political world into base, swing, and reach voters, and generally they don't speak to their base. They target every message to the swing voter. So, since IWV's mission is to expand our base, we do original research, message development, then test it in the real world and make an investment decision about whether or not to deploy it. Put another way, use the right bait for the fish you want to catch. Don't use the bait that is comfortable for you. What's the right bait? We've been doing this since 2010, but in the last year or so, I found two books that help create the framework and articulate why what it is that we do works. Jonathan Haidt's The Righteous Mind makes clear that too often we speak to values that resonate with at best 30% of the country, or worse, talk about money, which isn't a value, and fail to speak to those values, compassion and fairness, which nearly 100% of the country responds to. Simon Sinek's Start With Why shows that we are leading with our products, not our purpose, which is no way to win and make a sale to anyone who isn't already a fan. Take welfare reform as an example. For 15 years, we talked about cheating, fraud, wasteful spending, and got nowhere. But then Myron Magnet and Charles Murray changed the argument to how welfare was hurting people and trapping them in poverty. And we went from fighting against people and for money to fighting for people having better lives, and we won. On another example, you remember the legislative walkout in Wisconsin in 2011? Various groups on our team ran ads attacking unions, which made our base feel great, but alienated independents and women who went south on Walker. By the recall in 2012, campaign messaging had at least shifted from union bashing to talking about what was good for the hardworking taxpayer, but they hadn't talked about what was fair. We did, and the results were remarkable. We created that website, Is That Really Fair? In the control group, who were getting the best advertising the Walker campaign and outside groups could buy, Walker led by 5 points. But those who had also gotten our messaging about fairness, the gap was now 36 points for a net gain of 31 points. We did something similar with the healthcare law, where voters, in fact, if you dig into it, know about 3 pages of the law. You know the parts about how supposedly compassionate it is. We created a website, healthreformquestions.com, and used that to create an education campaign for people to find out how much they really knew about the effects of the law and how uncompassionate and unfair it really is. Applying that message to battleground states got us a 10-point improvement in the ballot test for Romney overall, and among independents who recalled receiving the messaging, we saw a 23-point improvement. But Romney didn't win. Why not? Among voters whose key concern was voting for somebody who cares about somebody like me, Obama and empathy won 81% of those voters, while Romney, with his facts and data, won 19%. The difference is largely driven by the way conservatives now talk about economics. So many sound like corporatists. They only care about business and business owners, even if we know that's not true. What they don't sound like is Reagan, whose purpose was to improve life for all Americans and who rarely talked about business, small business, or even entrepreneurs. Indeed, Independent Women is researching better economic messages. It's not yet complete, but already we know that Reagan was right. For example, opportunity economy trumps economic freedom, free enterprise, free market, and capitalism. Job creators trumps corporations, companies, and businesses. The American people is not only better than the middle class, which is what the left is using, but hardworking taxpayers. Hopefully in the panel we can get to more of what we've learned, but as time is short, just remember, start with purpose about how you want to help people. Speak to broadly held values, particularly compassion and fairness. Tell stories. Remember to convince your audience, not the choir. Take a page from progressives, settle for a slice, and then another slice, going for the whole loaf, if going for the whole loaf will set you back. And visit our discussion guides for suggestions on how the average voter should talk about different issues with their friends. After 6 years, we know that this different messaging works, and works really well, and look forward to exploring new and more effective ways to be persuasive and win. Thank you.
Thanks, Heather. Now, we're over to Norquist.
Excellent, Heather. Thanks. We're right, and they're wrong. We know that. Our job is to make more of us and fewer of them. We have to figure out how to speak to undecideds and convince them to join our team in the march towards liberty rather than their team on the march towards greater government control. Now, in Washington, D.C., this is going to be difficult over the next 2 years, and the reason is the Republicans have the votes to pass good stuff, and Obama can veto it. Obama has the capacity to invent truly icky stuff, and we won't pass it in the House and Senate. We have 2 evenly matched sumo wrestlers, exactly the same weight, bouncing against each other unappealingly for 2 years. Nobody gets knocked outside the red circle. So how do we communicate to our base, who already agrees with us, and to voters we'd like to agree to us while this is going on? We have to have bifocal vision. And by that, I mean we have to see and speak to where we're going. We're going to California. We're going to the Promised Land. We're going all that way. We're going to pass the Ryan budget plan. We're going to get rid of the income tax. The direction of where we want to go needs to be clear. But we also need, with bifocal vision, to look at our feet so we don't trip or walk into traffic, so that we focus on today and making little gains today, the slices of the bread that Heather was talking about, because there'll be opportunities to get little pieces of legislation that aren't terribly exciting. But we got to do that Frank Underwood thing where we turn to the audience and say, today we're taking baby steps, but our goal is all the way to California. If you're trying to get to California and you find yourself in West Virginia, that's not treason. West Virginia is on the way to California. If, however, you're trying to get to California and your feet are wet and everyone around you is speaking French, you're losing. You've been heading in the wrong direction. Losing is wrong. Compromise, meaning moving as fast and as quickly as we can towards liberty, recognizing that we're going to be moving slower than we'd like. Compromise is good. Compromise is moving in the right direction more slowly than you'd like. But at the state level, we can make tremendous change in our capacities here. And on that, we have 24 states with 150 million people in them. Half the country lives in a Republican-controlled state. Democrats have 7 states with 50 million people in them, a third as many. There, we can do what Bertolt Brecht wanted to do. Remember the left-wing screenwriter, playwright, who said when the communists were shooting at East German workers because there was a workers' revolt in 1953, and you're not supposed to have a workers' revolt in the workers' paradise, he gave the answer, what we need to do is elect a new people, because it couldn't be the government's fault. We can, in the states, elect a new people. And by that, I mean the demographics that matter to freedom-loving people are not the demographics the Democrats talk about all day, immutable things. When we create more liberties, we create more advocates for liberties. Homeschooling, illegal in all states 30 years ago. Today, legal in all 57 states. We have 2 million kids being homeschooled. 10 million have been homeschooled since they started going to school. And that means there are a lot of families out there who know the other team would take away the most important thing in their life given the chance. Concealed carry permits. The idea that you should get a shall issue concealed carry to take care of yourself and your family and protect yourself. There are today 11 million Americans with concealed carry permits. 11 million. Those are people who've decided to take control of their own life, and they know darn well that if the Democrats had half a chance, they would take that away from them. That is, a person with a concealed carry permit is a different human being than the one who says, you know, I'm so glad I pay my taxes and get government services, because if anything went wrong, the government would come and they draw this white chalk line all around. That'd be very helpful. This person has decided to take control of their own life. School choice, the hundreds of thousands of people with scholarships. You think if the politicians try and take that away, they haven't made an enemy for life. Share ownership. Why did President Obama try and shut down the 529s that millions of families, more than 7 million families, 12 million kids are trying to use to go to school? Because he knows that if you have $5,000 worth of stock and a savings account, an IRA, a 401k, a 529, makes you 18% more Republican on average. It changes the nature of who you are. You recognize threats to economic growth as threats to you personally. We can, at the state level, change the laws to create more people who benefit from liberty, who know the other team would take that away, and that is one mechanism through the states. While we live through the next 2 years here in D.C. with gridlock, in the states, we can recreate a stronger freedom-loving electorate day by day. Thank you.
Thanks, Grover.
Great job.
And last from Tammy Bruce.
Excellent.
Hey, everybody.
Welcome to CPAC 2015. I'm Tammy Bruce. You can learn more about me, by the way, at tammybruce.com. I didn't mention that last year, and I regret it. So I'm doing it right at the outset right now. You know what I'm going to speak to you about? If you're familiar with where I come from the left wing of things. And part of what I learned on the left, because all they focus on is your mind, is the issue of the manipulation of you, specifically and personally. Great stuff from both Heather and Grover, absolutely. But what the left has spent generations doing in this battle for your mind is trying to convince you that you're wrong, that you do not have the moral high ground, that you can't trust yourself, that America doesn't want what you're selling. The bottom line is, the reason they spend so much time and energy in moving that message to you is because they know the truth. That the moment the light turns on, America will realize, and has realized, as we saw, of course, last year in November. That was a pretty exciting experience, wasn't it? The midterms? Now, I want you to think about that. Did that surprise you? Because according to the left, according to the Democrat Party and to liberals, that kind of thing wasn't supposed to happen because America is rejecting what conservatism is. Well, quite the opposite. Most of the energy from liberals is spent making you surrender, making you think that it's not even worth engaging in this process. We know, of course, that's a lie. Might as well have been, of course, I don't know how long Jonathan Gruber's been on the planet, but maybe he's been operating for several generations about lying to the American people. But those days can be over, but it takes a decision that you make as an individual. This is not going to be, and shouldn't be, a hard, long slog. This is the same nation that gave 49 of the 50 states to President Reagan, and Minnesota probably was stolen, but we could deal with that later. The American people have always responded to a message of freedom. So when you've heard about compromise and reaching out to people who perhaps don't share your way of life, but this doesn't mean that you have to give up your values. Quite the opposite, is that there's this sense that Americans who are different from conservatives, whether it's about issues of faith, whether it's about gays, whether it's about people of color, fact of the matter is the singular message about conservatism, what it brings, is personal freedom. Personal freedom comes from economic freedom. No one wakes up or when they're 7 years old and says, oh gosh, I wish government could control my life. You know, and nobody does that. And yet the left messages to people that, you know, without government, you're lost. And of course, they've made it to be that way, right? They've created an environment where their work has made things more hopeless, and then they use that hopelessness to say, well, you need more of us, don't you? It is, of course, a ridiculous framework. For us, and what I want to encourage you to do as having come from the left, is reaffirm your correctness. Reaffirm the idea and the nature of why you're a conservative, which is to improve the quality of people's lives, right? I mean, you want more of your own life to be free. You want to be able to make choices that best suit you. You don't want some stranger, some bureaucrat making decisions for you about where you can spend your money, what you can eat, whether or not you're going to get a nonprofit status, right? Or whether you can start a small business, how much of your own fruits of your labor you can keep. Who wants that? Nobody wants that. This is about freedom. Every American wants that, regardless of sexual orientation, regardless of complexion, regardless even of a relationship with God. Now, I believe in God. I'm not a big fan of organized religion. I'm also a gay woman. That's a sliver of my identity. What I am, I'm a conservative. I'm an American first, who has a lot of different elements to what makes me who I am, right? That message, that fact, for everyone who's also watching on television here and around the world, the fact is, especially if you're a minority, the only thing that sets you free is financial freedom and small government. As minorities, especially, the conservative ideal, the basis of conservatism, is what informs the power of our lives. The ability to make choices that best suit us, whatever those choices might be. And your conservatism relies on Americans understanding that that also presumes, as we can here in America, that we can trust ourselves and how we live our lives with personal dignity, a respect for our community, and a commitment to the nation as a whole. Because this is the last place on earth where you can be different and not be chased down and imprisoned or killed, where it's not a crime to be different or to speak differently. So for you, when it comes to action and making a difference here, this is about moving past your comfort zone, right? Maybe you're a member of your local NRA, right? Maybe you're a member of your local Tea Party. Well, what about Rotary? What about getting involved with the PTA? Especially if you're homeschooling, another good element for you. But getting involved in groups and with communities that maybe normally you wouldn't have gotten involved with. Perhaps local AIDS outreach. Perhaps getting involved with some non-political groups especially. And engaging your newfound friends in topics of freedom and not politics, economics, the future of our families, what we have in common. You'll find that the conservative ideal is what everyone has in common. No single parent thinks about how lovely it will be to always wait for the check from the government. No woman is always waiting and hoping to find the person who's going to save them from themselves. We too have independence and power, and we want to use it. But we're not going to use it as long as Washington is up there telling us what to do. So for you, it's about realizing that the conservative ideal, separate from party politics, is the thing that will make things better. And that for you in your own mind, to not think that, well, you've got to convince people who don't believe in conservatism, or that what you believe is something that Americans don't want. Quite the contrary. I'll leave you with this analogy about the power that you have as an individual when you decide. Liberalism works 24/7 at keeping the light off in the room. And they spend that time, because you are the one who turns on the light, their energy is spent convincing you that everybody wants the room dark, that nobody wants to see what's in the room, that everybody's fine with the way that things are, and you're the aberration, because who are you that you want to turn the light on? All it takes is a decision for you to reject that argument. Everybody knows in their hearts, of course, that's not true. Everybody wants the light on. All it takes is turning the light on. And then it can be seen. And that's what, of course, ruins the liberal agenda, is an open discussion about who they are, about their results, about what the agenda does in increasing poverty and in increasing hopelessness, increasing the decrease of our own power as Americans, and as a result, as you've seen around the world, a decrease in our own dignity and power as a nation. You are the ones who will turn that around by deciding to turn the light on, to reject the premise that's presented to you, to reject the liberal argument that Americans want what's happening. Use the 2014 midterms if you have to. But remember, in 2016, it's going to become even more furious. You've seen conservative influencers in the last week or two be viciously attacked for speaking their minds. That will only increase. Do not be afraid of that. They're doing it because they know if you speak up, it changes everything. But in order to do so, you have to decide. That's it. Thank you, everybody. Pleasure.
All right, thank you, all three of you. Before we dive into the discussion about building your party, I wanted to just first touch upon what you just wrapped up about how there's many people within the Republican Party that might say building the base, broadening the brand is watering down it. Grover?
Well, it doesn't need to. What we need to find out is I think the center-right coalition, the Reagan Republican Party, is made up of all people who, on their vote-moving issue, what they want from the government is to be left alone. They're very different people. Some people want to focus on their business life, or their faith, or their family, or raising their kids, or their Second Amendment rights. There are different things that make people excited about liberty and make them fear state control. And there isn't some list of 10 things, or 5 things, or 2 things that everybody has to agree on. They have to agree on the one thing that they want to be left alone at. The one that I discovered most recently is vaping. Those e-cigarettes that a lot of people have shifted from tobacco to e-cigarettes, healthier for them. It's a large part of their life. They spend more time vaping than a lot of people spend praying. It's part of who they are. And they know that the left, the nanny state, wants to ban it and or tax it and then ban it. And all of a sudden, there's a group of Uber users, right? A number of years ago, were there people who would call and write their congressman and say, back off, leave me alone, I want Uber? Didn't exist before. Be on the lookout for pieces of freedom that matter to other voters, that may not matter to you, but matter to other voters, and message to them on that liberty.
Yeah. And Heather, how does the Republican Party do that?
Well, I think that you need to decide in your own mind whether you are more concerned with hypothetical purity, or you're actually concerned with increasing freedom and the quality of life for most Americans. You can demand the hypothetically pure that's politically impossible all at once, or you can do what Grover says, which is you can take incremental steps in the right direction and reintroduce certain concepts to people. There are a lot of people now who don't understand. If you talk to a lot of doctors, They have no idea how you could possibly take care of people without a single payer system. And in fact, a lot of us understand that it's the single payer system that diminishes the quality of healthcare and innovation and increases the cost and is ultimately going to be destructive, because we see, that's one of the great things about Jonathan Haidt's book. He says what changed him from being a liberal Democrat is understanding the psychology that prevents you as a liberal Democrat from seeing the second and third order consequences of ideas which sound good on their surface, but in fact are very destructive if put into practice. The goal here, for those of us who want to see the country actually move towards freedom, and not just towards being left alone, but to better life for everyone and more freedom for everyone, is to take those incremental steps by creating a broad enough coalition that you have majorities to do things in a slow but steady way. If you look at the progressive left, what they are good at is a tenacious holding on to an idea over a long period of time and not demanding that they don't water it down, but they'll take the incremental victories and then the next incremental victory. A lot of the people on our team seem to have forgotten that that's a solution that works. And if you look at the track record on the right, holding on to purity has not been a winning strategy.
If I could expand on that, just because it's an excellent point. I think conservatives, now I'm not a Republican, I'm a conservative, and someday I might become one, because Ronald Reagan is my hero, the first president I could vote for. I think conservatives feel that it's an existential issue and stick with the foundation because of what I've seen happen, which is the leftist argument against the ideal itself. And so you become quite passionate about holding on to your ideals because they are the foundation of the future and literally of the survival of the country and freedom, not just for us, but for the world. But that's part of the trick. That's the trick, to manipulate you into a distraction that you're forgetting that the conservative ideal is built into everything that every American wants. And after 6 years of liberal policy, Americans finally are seeing what liberalism is. And it's 92 million people off the work rolls. It's 1 out of every 5 American households on food stamps. It's an attempt to eliminate your financial freedom, which eliminates your political voice. Today, the FCC is voting on making the internet a utility. Keep regulating that, and what's going to happen next? Radio shows like mine, of course, are going to be deemed as a problem. So they want to distract you, and I think that, yes, once you realize that your view, that your conservative ideal is at the foundation of freedom, you don't need to worry about it being an existential issue when it comes to how you approach things, that you can deal with it within your favorite issue. You don't have to deal with every issue, because that can be overwhelming. Maybe your issue is Obamacare or immigration. Maybe it's Common Core. Whatever it is, because there's enough of us to where all the issues will be dealt with. So getting out of a framework that this is an existential fight. No, the moment you turn on that light, as we saw with President Reagan, the nation can change in a day. In a day it can change. And that's what you must remember.
So being in the news industry, 2016 is what we're all talking about right now. What is the GOP brand? What does it need to be, and how are we going to get there?
You want to start?
No.
Oh, okay.
Open question.
Well, I think it's two big things. Over time, it became the party that wouldn't raise your taxes. May do a number of other foolish things, but it wouldn't raise your taxes. Okay. Step one. Then the Tea Party came over with this little love tap with a 2x4 right to the forehead and said, and spending, remember spending. And the Republican Party very quickly, House and Senate, ended earmarks, which had been considered a sign of virility. I have stolen all this stuff from other states. It is for someone who lives near you, you know. And everyone was impressed when people would do earmarks. Now it's like farting at the dinner table. You know, nobody wants earmarks. And the Tea Party said earmarks bad, overspending bad. So two big pieces that stick: don't spend so much, don't raise taxes. And I think there's a third wave of reform government, which makes those two work, which is you reform government to make it cost less so you don't have to raise taxes and you can reduce taxes. And reform is everything from Uber to other stuff that is a different way of looking at it. That, I think, is sort of the brand that is a fair brand, is an accurate brand.
So, Heather, you mentioned the polling pages from the progressive agenda. Tammy, what were some of the things that, when you were left-leaning, how did the Republican Party, how did the conservatives bring you to that side?
Well, on the left, it's a lie. They know what to say. You can keep your health insurance if you want to keep it. You can keep your doctor. They know what's important to Americans. You can keep your hospital. Heather, you've got a great site. My cancellation, is it .com?
Right. If anybody has their health insurance policy canceled, you just take a picture of yourself with that cancellation letter and you send it to mycancellation.com. And it caused a huge uproar, obviously, when the first wave of cancellations came in, and there are more with the employer and individual mandates that are about to happen. And most Americans don't understand that the CBO has projected that I believe it's 93 million Americans will not be able to keep those policies that they were told that they liked and they could keep.
So we know that the left understands what's important, and then they kill it. So they knew that was important. Jonathan Gruber said, we know that Americans care about medical costs coming down. So that's what we said about Obamacare, even though they had no idea what would happen. And they didn't know because they didn't want to look, because it's like the monster really is under the bed, but so we won't look there because they weren't going to like the answer and they knew it. So here's what at least certainly some pages, and what you hear the left articulating. Still, once again, back to a common thread here. Personal freedom, living your life the way you want to live it, right? Being able to, especially for women, as when we think about women and being a block for the Democrats, which is just remarkable, considering, of course, our relationships with our doctors, as an example, is lifelong, more intense, more, frankly, important. We see doctors more often, and so we lost those relationships. Women and people of color start most of the small businesses in this country. And with regulations, we can't do that either. So this is really, it goes down to what both Heather and Grover were speaking about, which is being able to speak to, as Reagan did, the nature of who we are as individuals. So I think that within that, there has to be some statistics and a bit of an understanding about taxes and spending, but we understand that on a personal level. This is about arguing and speaking to, is your life better than it was 4 years ago? Ask those 92.8 million people off of the work rolls. Ask when you look at the general malaise in this country, ask about whether or not you want to be lied to about why an ambassador is killed in a foreign country and why we're not killing a genocidal terrorist enemy overseas. Why we've lost 4 Middle Eastern countries, our embassies have had to be closed and abandoned. Ask yourselves, is your life, the potential future for your children's lives, better than it was for 6 years ago? And that's where Reagan connected it to the individual. He asked individuals to think personally about where you are. Forget about the rhetoric from Washington. We know they lie. We know it. So you have to ask yourself, not what the TV news is asking you or telling you, but what your personal experience is. I think every candidate, especially like Mia Love, who embodies and has the personal story of that kind of remarkable life experience. So voters could look to her and think, yeah, I can relate to that. Every candidate has a personal life. We've got to, I think, reinforce that as conservatives, that it's the personal that matters.
Okay.
All right, well, let's give our panel another round of applause. And we just have a minute left, so we're just going to show you some quick slides. I think they're up on the screen. Oh, okay, great. I wasn't sure if they were going to be. So this is just some things that these 3 have submitted for you guys, a summary. If you want to take a picture to save, go ahead and do it. Some things of what we've learned. I need to get new contacts, so I really can't read it that far. And then I think there's also 2 more slides with resources as well as how to move forward. Is there?
Amanda, while they look at the slides, if I could just suggest, practice when you're talking to someone who agrees with you on everything, talk in such a way that if there was someone listening who was undecided, they would be as interested and moved as the person who was hearing this for the 47th time and he already agreed with you. You know, if you've got someone voting for you, talking to them again may be fun, but one fish, one hook. You don't need to explain 12 times to the same person why to be with you. Be looking for additional people to bring into the movement, and always talk so that both people hear you correctly. The solid Reagan Republican hears, understands, and agrees with what you're talking about, and the interested but not committed person goes, yeah, I think that too. And if you can do that, then every conversation is both affirming to the base and builds the movement.
And remember, it's not politics, it's about freedom. Again, you don't have to be a Republican. It's about conservatism. It's about freedom versus politics.
All right, thank you so much. All right, I think we're good.